Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Golden Axe 3, originally for Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, depending on your region. This is an arcade-style hack-and-slash game and the follow-up to Golden Axe 2. It's kind of interesting because it was originally released in 1993 in Japan only as a cartridge, and it didn't see a release in the US until 1995 on the Sega Channel. If you don't know what the Sega Channel is, it was a very, very early content delivery system via the internet, which in the 90s was a huge thing, and barely anybody had this thing. It was not a particularly good system. It had a subscription fee, all sorts of things like that. But that was the only way you could get access to this thing in North America up until later on when it got re-released as part of various collections and such. And what you're seeing here is footage recorded from the Sega Genesis Classics collection, which is available on Steam. And it's kind of interesting that it wasn't released in the US until a couple of years after it was actually released in Japan. The previous games didn't really have that problem, and the press at the time were all like, well, there must have been a reason they didn't release this thing in North America. And when it finally actually did come to North America, people were like, oh, that's why. So the question there becomes, what did they find out once it finally came to the States? Well, as far as the presentation goes, it's really not all that impressive for its time. We'd seen games that looked far better than this, and by that point, we were kind of annoyed with the lack of improvement in the Golden Axe series in terms of its visuals. It's not that this game looks bad. It really doesn't. It's just very plain for its era. You're looking at sprites that are decent quality. The animations are also decent quality, somewhat choppy sometimes, but fairly decent quality. You're looking at environments that are mostly the same kind of things that you were seeing in Golden Axe 1 and 2. And all of it is really not much of a step up from the previous two games. So what you end up with is just lackluster visuals. At least it's fairly bright and colorful. And then there's the sound design. They did improve the music a bit from the previous game. It's certainly more adventure, action, fantasy style music. But that's kind of it. The sound effects are almost as bad as they were in the previous game. Not quite there, but they're almost there. But let's face it, it's not hard to beat what is effectively static. So just about anything would have been better. And they certainly did improve upon that. So they are to be commended for at least realizing the mistake they made with Golden Axe 2. It's just a bit of a shame that they didn't go further with it and didn't push the hardware a bit more instead of playing it as safe as they did. But obviously what really matter here are the story and the gameplay, and the story in this is really quite weak and is serving to be not much more than a setup for the actual gameplay. The idea is that the Prince of Darkness has stolen the Golden Axe and put an evil curse over the warriors, except for you managed to break free from it, and so you have to go off and set things right, lift the curse, defeat the Prince of Darkness, and return with the Golden Axe. There's not much to the plot at all, and apart from a cutscene at the beginning, you're going to find that you don't really notice all that much about the plot itself. The only reason you really notice the bit at the beginning is because it's Julius Thunderhead who's giving you the "You must go and find the Prince of Darkness and return with the Golden Axe" speech. That's kinda it. In fact, he's the only character from the previous games who returns. We're dealing with an all-new cast here, which I hear you saying, but DW, there's a barbarian and there's an Amazon. Yes, there are, except that they're not the same. You now have, instead of Axe Battler, Cane Grinder, and instead of Tyrus Flare, you have Sarah Byrne, but they pretty much function the same. They no longer have the dwarf character in the game. Instead, they replaced him with two other characters. You have the Black Panther Kronos and the giant Proud Cragger, where Proud Cragger obviously does a lot of damage, but he's kind of slow and lumbering. Kronos is obviously very fast. In fact, he can do a double jump, and so can Sarah Byrne. But other than that, you're dealing with pretty much the same kind of stuff that you saw in the previous two games. You run around, you smack some bad guys up, you get magic to fill up your magic meter, and then you can unleash a powerful magic attack. Usually you're going to want to reserve that for the bosses of different levels. And of course there's different levels of magic power. They did change some things up with the gameplay though. In addition to having these two new characters and having the double jump idea, they all have their own movesets. Certain characters just have certain moves that they can do that others can't. For example, instead of doing a normal jump slash like you had in the previous two games, Proud Cragger actually jumps in the air and then he does a sort of dive kick maneuver. They also changed up the way that the magic itself works from the previous game anyway. It's back to the old Golden Axe 1 system, where you press the magic button and you use all of the magic that you got, you unleash your attack at whatever level it was at, then it's going to do that kind of damage and have that animation. They did change up how much damage it does in that all of the characters' magic does exactly the same damage, which is kind of odd because of how they had it set up in the previous two games, where, for example, Tyra's Flare had the most powerful magic out of all of them, but she didn't necessarily have the best melee capability. So you got to have that trade-off with the more powerful magic that just did a massive amount of damage and had really cool animations. Not so much here. Instead, you have basically 3 levels of magic, and they all do the same damage across all characters. They just have different animations for it. It's a bit of a shame, but it's what they've got. They also added in the idea of rescuing prisoners, where you can actually go into a level and you'll find these prisoners just sitting there being held by various enemies, or they'll be encased in boxes of some description. And so you can either destroy the box and then they run free, or you can defeat the enemies that are holding them and then they'll run free. And once you get 5 of those, you gain a new life, which is kind of a cool mechanic, and it makes sense. So it's nice that they decided to change things up without being too wildly out of the realm of possibility or very gamey about it. And then there's the other things. The things that I can't really test, because you can't really play multiplayer with this unless you play with somebody else hooked up to the game. And I can't really do that right now. The schedules don't really permit. So what I can't really test is the tandem stuff that they added to team play. You can now do tandem attacks and tandem magic and such like that. And the idea is that when you do this stuff together, it's more powerful than it is when you're just doing it alone. That's pretty much it. And honestly, those are the main changes they made. They did add in a few things, and it's nice that they have a slightly larger roster than before, but you can't really shake the feeling that this could have been way more than it actually was. It's not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, you do have some issues here and there where you won't actually hit the enemy and you're not entirely sure why. It just seems like if you're a slight pixel off or something. Or even worse, you'll end up doing moves that you didn't want to do. For example, you'll often block when you didn't want to block, and for the life of me, I cannot figure out how I end up blocking. I'm pressing the attack button and suddenly I start blocking, and you can't really get out of it. So that gets incredibly annoying sometimes. But of course, it's worth noting that that's really nothing new to Golden Axe. I mean, it existed in the previous 2 games. It just would have been really nice if they had improved upon that thing. It does seem like hitting is a bit more precise in this game than it was in the previous 2 games, but that can be a problem sometimes, because you'll do moves that you didn't want to do, and it just becomes a complete mess. But by and large, the gameplay is pretty much the same kind of stuff you're used to if you've played the previous Golden Axe games. And I think that's partly the problem. It didn't really improve enough over the previous 2 games to warrant actually playing it, unless you just really want to play as one of the new characters, or you want to take part in the choice system that they have in the game. You can now choose your path. That's another thing they added in, but it doesn't really change all that much. It just changes what levels you're actually running around on. Gameplay is still pretty much the same regardless. So it's one of those games that's just kind of hard to recommend, but at the same time, it's hard to not recommend it. Because it's not a bad game. In fact, it's pretty decent. It's just that it's a lackluster sequel. It could have been way more than it actually is. And it just seems like they played it way too safe with this particular game. and ended up with a very mixed bag as a result. It's not for everyone, but if you liked the previous Golden Axe games, you'll probably be able to get something out of it. Just don't go in expecting anything revolutionary or just wildly different from the previous two games, because it really does play like a mixture of the previous two games, but with some slight changes here and there to make it its own thing. If you are interested in checking the game out, I'll have a link in the video description box to where you can do so. Thanks for watching.